We are live. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'll introduce our guests in just a moment. A little bit of housekeeping to start with, because we're streaming this to a number of channels, and we have viewers from the Red River Apiarist Association who are essentially the hosts of this. This started as just a Red River Apiarist Association webinar, and it expanded to streaming on the Manitoba Beekeepers Association channel, as well as the That Bee Man channel. That happens to be my own. We're streaming also to Walker Bee Ranch YouTube channel, Bob Walker there. We're streaming to Sawmill Charlie's YouTube channel and Loma Vista Bee Company in sunny California. So the reason I bring that up is that you will see comments and questions in the chat on the YouTube channel that you are viewing this stream on. And it may be a little confusing that we are referring to and bringing up chat questions that maybe were entered in a different channel and you don't see those. That's fine. When you have questions, we will capture those questions and present those questions to Tom and Heather and the panel at the end. At the end of the presentation, we'll bring a few more people on the screen to liven up the discussion, and we'll go through some of the questions that were presented during the presentation. So please welcome from Nod Apiary Products. Nod stands for Nature's Own Design. Nod produces a few different products, but tonight we're talking about Formic Pro, and discussion also particularly on formic acid being the active ingredient. So with us tonight we have Tom Nolan, and I'll let Tom and Heather introduce their titles and positions, and we also have Dr. Heather Broccard-Bell with Tom. They're kind of sharing a screen, so you might see Tom and Heather on one screen and Tom on another screen. And so they have a presentation for us, which will run most of an hour, I'm told. So we will get right into that, and take it away, Tom and Heather.
Well, great. Thanks, Brad. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you guys tonight. It was really appreciated. I thought it was just going to be a small, little intimate group with the Red River crowd, but it's nice to see we're live on YouTube. So the more the merrier. So yeah. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, so I guess I'll introduce myself, and then Heather will introduce herself. My name is Tom Nolan. I'm the North American sales rep for Nod. For those of you who don't know me, I've been with Nod, I guess it's coming up on 9 years now. Been keeping bees about 13 years. I consider myself a small-scale hobby beekeeper. I live in the city. I live in Toronto, so I run about 100 colonies. I have some urban bee yards, a couple of rooftops at the University of Toronto downtown campus and University of Toronto suburban campus. And I got a couple of yards outside the city, which are traditional sort of rural bee yards. What about you, Heather? Tell us about you.
All right. Well, I've been with Nod for since 2021, so it's almost a little over 3 years. I'm a researcher. I'm the honeybee health researcher. My background is academic research. I've been studying bees since 2014. Prior to moving to Ontario, I was working in California for 7 years before that. And between myself and my colleague, Hannah, we manage Nod's research colonies. So we're running around somewhere between 80 and 100 colonies year round.
Yeah, so I guess the format we're going to take tonight is we're just going to tell you a little bit about ourselves, a little bit of our beekeeping backgrounds, and Then a little bit about Nod, you know, how Nod came to be, and then we'll get right into the heart of what we're here to talk about is our formic acid products, mainly Formic Pro. Just for you beekeepers out there, going to show you a couple of photos of my operation. This is this rooftop here is the University of Toronto Scarborough campus. It's a nice little rooftop. They added those stones a few years ago. It used to be black tar, and it was really hot up there. I'm actually not a big fan of rooftop beekeeping, to be honest. You know, anyone who's been beekeeping for any amount of time knows that slugging boxes in and out of a truck and, you know, in the yard is tough enough. This particular yard here, we add, I do 3 flights of stairs before I get to the landing, where I can then load my supers onto a cart, down to a hallway, on an elevator, down 2 more flights. So it's rough, but that's the downside of urban beekeeping or rooftop beekeeping. The positive side is nice, safe, secure, no vandalism, no theft, built-in customer. The university buys all my honey, so it's a kind of a nice operation. This photo here, you can tell by the bee escapes. I was getting ready to harvest honey here. It's my lovely wife. She's also I call her the reluctant beekeeper. When I first got into beekeeping, I asked her to give me a hand on the weekend, and she told me, listen, let's get something straight here. That's your thing. I'm not helping you with bees every weekend. You know, fast forward 10 years later, she's grafting queens, making splits. I got a yard with 10 hives. I come back, there's 15 in there. So yeah, she's been, she's a full-on beekeeper. And I jokingly say it, but I'm really serious. I travel a lot for Nod. I'm really on the road most of the time during beekeeping season. I can sincerely say, if my wife was not the beekeeper that she is, there's no way I could keep 100 colonies with the schedule that I have working for Nod. So yeah, she's a great asset to our little sideline operation that we call Hive Town Honey. It's it's my main yard. This is a yard that's just on the edge of the city, out by the Toronto Zoo. For you guys in Western Canada, you'll recognize those 6-frame Lewis and Son nucleus colonies. I like running the 6-frame nuke colonies. I sell maybe 20, 30 colonies a year, more of a hobby. I wouldn't really call it a business. I consider it a hobby that's a little bit out of control, but it's starting to make a little bit of money from it. So that's always good. Here's another yard that I have that's maybe about an hour outside of the city. It's me doing one of our Formic Pro applications. Just a little bit of a side note on the history of my beekeeping. When I got into beekeeping, my first yard was on a farm that was, they grew vegetables on this farm, and they were trying to get certified organic. So just by chance, really, long before I worked for Nod, I was using their Mitaway quick strips before we had our Formic Pro. I've never actually used a synthetic miticide. For 10 years, I used exclusively Max and then Formic Pro. And only in the last couple of years, I've been introducing a little bit of oxalic acid for my fall cleanup. But we can talk about those things later. So that's just a little bit about, it's another one of my rural yards. I run single brood boxes. Yeah, it makes a little bit of honey production and nukes. Another yard. You can tell this yard, I have a little weird little system I do. If you notice, that's the same yard that had the 6-frame nukes. I usually start off my season with 6-frame nukes. Once they grow to a certain size, I sell off the nukes, and then I transfer them into 10-frame boxes. So I tend to overwinter them as 10-frame boxes. Yeah, so that's just a little bit about my my little out of control hobby. Let's talk a little bit about Nod. Nod, unlike many of our other companies that are selling varroa control products, Nod was a company that was started by beekeepers for beekeepers. I'm losing track of time, but I believe last year Nod celebrated 25 years. So we've grown. Nod has grown. I joined Nod, like I said, only 9 years ago, but like 25 years. The founders of Nod were beekeepers. When varroa came to Canada, which is more than 30 years ago, the founders of Nod wanted to develop a product that would deal with this devastating pest, the varroa destructor. And one of the main criteria they had is they wanted to use an active ingredient, something that would protect the wholesome image of honey. And they settled on formic acid, mainly because it wouldn't leave any wax or residue, and began their journey of trying to develop a safe product that would, deal with this parasitic mite, but at the same time, protect the wholesome image of honey. And, over the years, we've gone through a couple of different products. We started out with the old Mite Away, it was Mite Away 2, and then it was Formic, or Mite Away Quick Strips, and now our Formic Pro. And we'll talk more about the evolution of our product there. But the point is, we were a very small startup company. It was started by beekeepers that has grown into a global company with a reach across the globe. We're now registered in 29 countries with a few more on the horizon. So I really feel quite fortunate and proud to work for a company that's a Canadian company that's serving the beekeeping industry with a good product that we're quite proud of. So it's a little bit about Nod. I'm going to introduce us to our team. One of the things I always like to tell beekeepers, we sell our product through distribution. We don't sell direct to beekeepers. Any beekeeping, we're pretty much mainstream. Our product is available, I would say, if not everywhere, in almost every beekeeping supply store in North America. We don't sell direct to beekeepers, but one thing we do is we definitely service beekeepers. I put up this slide to meet our team because what we really want all beekeepers to know that we're accessible. You can call us for sales support or for technical support. Myself or Dana, Laura or Heather, really excited to have Heather because Heather's starting to do a lot of interesting research projects to answer a lot of those questions that I, as a sales rep, really couldn't answer that. We're learning 25 years and we're still learning about formic acid. So we got a lot of research projects on the horizon. But if you reach out to us via email or phone call, you will always get a human being on the phone, and highly unlikely you will get an answer. You will always get an answer back within 24 hours. And we get a lot of feedback from our customers on this issue. Something else we're quite proud of, that we're a really accessible company. So whether you're a small, brand new hobby beekeeper with your first hive, or if you're a commercial beekeeper with thousands of hives, when you pick up the phone, you'll be treated the same way from our staff. We're here to serve you. And again, yeah, something we're quite proud of, actually. Yeah, so service is one of our core values, and we always want to make sure that our beekeepers know that. So anyone online here today thinking, oh, I wish I would have asked him that question last night on the live stream, pick up the phone, email, you'll get us. All right, so let's move on a little bit. Let's get into the products. I'm going to have to apologize to our friends online who maybe are not Canadians, maybe US or some of our global, if there's anybody outside of North America here. When I initially put our presentation together, I thought I was going to be talking to our Red River crowd in Manitoba. So I thought it was strictly a Canadian crowd. So I'm focusing on our Canadian registered products. Right now in Canada, we have 3 products registered. We have our main product, Formic Pro. We sell liquid formic acid, 65%, and our winter bee wrap, our Bee Cozy winter wrap. A little bit about the liquid formic acid. Canada is the only country that we sell the liquid 65% formic acid. And the main reason for that is that our original products that we made, the original Mite Away was a thick pad that you soaked in liquid formic acid. Just to back it up a little bit, the folks here at Nod, we weren't the ones who discovered that formic acid killed varroa mites. I mean, that was well known in Europe before we did that. The challenge with trying to kill this parasitic mite is we're trying to kill an insect on an insect. And so really the challenge becomes the delivery mechanism, right? Our original product, the Mite Away pad, was a thick pad that we soaked in the liquid 65 formic acid. And it was quite effective, but it can also be very hard, and sometimes you could end up killing, far too many bees. It was just quite hard on the colony. Some tweaks to the original Mite Away, ended up putting it inside in a plastic bag with some perforated holes. What we were trying to do there was to slow down the release of the formic acid. an improvement from the Mite-Away. We still weren't there, a little bit better. Another challenge with that is the thickness of the pad that we were using didn't fit within the bee space in between the boxes. So we had to use a spacer or a rim. You know, I still run into beekeepers in Western Canada who say, man, I got thousands of these rims that I don't use anymore. And then, of course, our next, you know, through innovation, the next product that we came out with was the Mite-Away quick strips. And what happened with the Mite-Away quick strips was we moved away from these pads and created a polysaccharide gel pad. It was a gel pad that's infused or impregnated with formic acid with an ecoic paper. We'll get a little more into that. But now we had a product that was much thinner, fits in the bee space between the boxes, no rim, and this is a pre-made, ready-made product where the formic acid is already inside the product. So a product that is much safer for the beekeeper, much more effective than these DIY pads that people are using today with the liquid formic acid. So this is one of the main reasons why we don't sell liquid formic acid in the US. We have no interest in registering it. Our formulated products, our Mite-Away quick strips, just back it up a little bit. The first gel pad that we came up with was the Mite-Away quick strips, or what some of us refer to as MAX. So it was a polysaccharide gel pad impregnated with the formic acid with an ecoic paper. And this paper helped slow down the release of the formic acid. So we had Mite-Away quick strips on the market for quite a few years. When I started beekeeping, that was my go-to product. I used it. I got used to using it. The product worked fine. It did have two challenges, though. Two challenges that led us to more innovation and coming out with the Formic Pro. Those two challenges were, one, it had a 12-month shelf life. That could be problematic for our resellers, for some of our commercial beekeepers. You know, if we make it, we've got it for a couple months. It ends up in one of our retail stores. They got it for a couple months. Maybe it's lost, 4 or 5 months. Beekeeper buys it, planning on using it in a couple months. Life gets in the way, something changes, and now you're up against the expiry date. So that was a challenge. The other challenge too was the Mite-Away quick strip was affected by storage temperature. You had to, if it was stored too hot, the product would start to break down. In most regions, this wasn't a problem, but it could become a problem for our beekeepers, our commercial beekeepers, and our retailers in some of the southern states, areas where they didn't have climate-controlled buildings, no air conditioners, storing the product, in metal sheds or barns where it can get very hot. The product would start to degrade. Having said that, if you were using Mite-Away quick strips within the expiry date, before the expiry date, and it was stored properly, it was a great product. I used it for years. I was happy with it. But those two things were always a challenge, that expiry date and the sensitivity to the storage temperature. So our Formic Pro was basically the next evolution of our products. Again, a polysaccharide gel pad impregnated with the formic acid with our ecoic paper. But we added some organic binders and stiffeners to the product, which really, it did two things. It extended the shelf life. So we went from a 1-year product to a 2-year shelf life. And also a much more stable product where it can store well even under high temperatures. Ideally, you want to be room temperature or cooler. But if Formic Pro is stored in higher temperatures, as long as it's out of direct sunlight, it just stores much better, and it's just a more stable product. So in Canada, if you notice, Mite-Away quick strips is not on this because we discontinued the Mite-Away quick strips. I lose track. I think it's been more than 2 years now that we discontinued it in Canada. And in the US, this will be our last year in the US. So any inventory that's in our dealers in the US will be pretty much gone by the end of this year. By next spring, you will not see Mite-Away quick strips on the market. So, and one of the things we did too during this transition was, at Nod, we had a decision to make. Do we discontinue the Mite-Away quick strips and introduce Formic Pro? We had a very large following on Mite-Away quick strips. We had People used it, people liked it, and it had brand recognition. So we decided to sort of let the market decide. We continued to make both of them for a few years, and the market really did decide. Most of our commercial beekeepers migrated over to the Formic Pro. So slowly we decided, yeah, it's time to retire the Mighty White Quick Tips. Good product, but I think Formic Pro a much better product. So that's where we are today with the evolution of the products. I usually have a little video that I play here with the life cycle of the varroa mite. We're having some technical problems here, so I think I'm going to skip through the video and not play the video. Okay, so let's get a little bit into Formic Pro. For those of you who may not be familiar with it, Formic Pro is available in 3 packages in 3 different sizes, 2 packs for hobbyists. So you open up the white envelope, and inside what you got are two sachets, one for each colony. So 2-pack, 2 colonies. We have a 10-pack, which is for 10 colonies, and a 30-pack, which will treat 30 colonies for our commercial beekeepers. Whoops, there we go. When you open up our packaging and you get inside that white envelope, what you'll find is a silver mylar sachet. As far as PPE, you want to open up the package with nitrile or rubber gloves. The thin nitrile gloves are fine. They'll get a little bit of vaporing off when you open a package, so a good idea to open a package away from your face. When you take out the strips from outside the silver mylar pouch, you'll see that the strips are wrapped in a white Ecowick paper. Now, every now and again, someone will confuse this paper as a wrapper. This is not a wrapper. The white paper that you see inside is an integral part of the product. It's actually, if you take a really good look at it, it's a composite type material. There's actually 3 layers. And again, this is what we actually call an Ecowick. So it's to help the formic acid vapor off slowly. We want it to vapor off slowly over a 14-day period. So again, it's a sugar gel pad infused with formic acid wrapped in this Ecowick paper, which never comes off. I get asked this question all the time. What happens if we take the paper off? I usually get that question asked after they've taken the paper off. so really what's going to happen is you're going to create a flash treatment where most of the vapors are going to vapor off within a 12-hour period, which can be very hard on the bees. You know, I've had people call me and say that they did that, and they're calling me 3 days later after they did that. And, you know, it can be very hard on the bees. In a lot of cases, if you got proper ventilation and you're well within the application temperatures, you'd be fine. But for most part, paper always stays on. Okay, so what makes our Formic Pro unique or different from other products on the market? The big one, number one, is this is the only registered product on the market that kills mites under the cap, under the brood cap, where they reproduce. So this is a big one. Most of the, and this is the reason why it's a short one-time treatment. Many of the other products that you might be used to, we have 42-day treatments, is because they're trying to get through 2 and 3 brood cycles. But our product actually will penetrate the cap, kill mites under the cap, as well as the phoretic mites or the mites that are in the dispersal phase that are on the bees. Second issue is, you know, myself, I've been using it, you know, twice a year for almost more than 10 years. You know, our CEO here has been using formic acid twice a year for probably more than 30 years. There have been no known documented cases of resistance. I would always say, and I've said several times before in presentations, that you know, you won't get resistance. You know, the mites will not develop resistance to formic acid. You know, I've been told by certain scientists, one of them sitting next to me, that we should never say never. So I've changed that to highly unlikely. And as of today, we have no known cases of resistance. So that's another great selling feature about the product. But also the third and an equally sort of important part about our product is it's organic and it's safe. But big key feature is you can use it during the honey flow with your supers on. Formic acid delivered via Formic Pro will not contaminate your wax or honey. So again, it penetrates the brood cap, highly unlikely you're going to get resistance, and it's a good clean product where it's not going to contaminate your wax or honey. So I think these are three of the things that make our product quite unique and different from some of the other products on the market. Efficacy. We've got a lot of data, from various trials done over the years. You know, I often hear you know, people say things like it's really hard to get a product registered in North America, getting through EPA. I can tell you it's a lot tougher getting a product registered in Europe. And as you can tell from our map, we're registered in quite a few countries in Europe. We know through our data that we're probably, when you're using 2 strips of Formic Pro, we're killing upwards of 98%, up to 98% of the phoretic mites. Below the cap, we're killing about 80% of the immature mites, the offspring, the firstborn male. So we're doing a really great job interrupting the reproductive cycle of the mites while killing the phoretic mites. So this, you know, I think this is really, it's a good product. It's a good product, you know. Let's go on. So we got 2 treatment options when it comes to Formic Pro. The option 1, which we call our option 1, 2 strips for 14 days. And we got option 2, which is 1 strip for 10 days, followed by a second strip for an additional 10 days for a total of 20 days. I think maybe in the past, we could have done a better job explaining the difference between these 2 options. And this is a really important part of presentation. And I know Heather is sort of quietly beside me here. Just anytime, Heather, you want to jump in, you know, you're more than welcome. The difference between these 2 items is we know our data and the science tells us that when you're using 2 strips, we're getting a good kill below the cap. When you're doing the 1+1 method, under ideal conditions, we may get some kill below the cap, but more than likely we're probably killing mostly phoretic mites. When I talk to several beekeepers on the phone and emails and you know, through my travels, you know, people will say, well, if the 2 strips kill below the cap, why even bother having the second option, the 1+1? Me personally, I almost always use 2 strips. I like to kill below the cap. I know that that's what really interrupts the brood cycle. So if I have a high mite count and I got a lot of cap brood, it's always 2 strips. Some people have concerns about setting the brood back, killing too much brood, particularly if it's early in the year where they're selling nucleus colonies. In cases like that, if your mite count is not really out of control, you have mites, you might be above threshold, you don't have a lot of capped brood, the 1+1 can be a sufficient treatment. But again, I may be a little biased. The beauty of this product is it kills below the cap. I mean, that's one of the main selling features. So I think why cut the dose in half? Really, this is the question. Me, I like the 2 strips. The odd time I'm doing my treatments, if I'm going through my yard, you know, usually what we say is we want to see at least 4 or 5 frames of brood in your colony. The odd time if I open up a colony yard and it's, you know, it's a little weaker than I think it should be, in a case like that, I might do the 1+1 treatment. But even in times, quite often when I have a weak colony like that, sometimes I think, well, you know, if the colony's not doing that well anyways, I'll still put in the 2 strips, and if it finishes them off, fine. If not, and quite often, you know, they will bounce back. So I think the important thing with these 2 options is to understand the difference. You're going to get much more delivery of the formic acid below the cap with the 2 strips. And of course, like I talked about earlier, it's a 12-month shelf life, room temperature, keep it out of direct sunlight. We get asked this question a lot too about freezing the pads. This is a kind of an interesting one. We personally haven't done a lot of trials or have a lot of data to answer this question. We do know that if you freeze the pads, it won't harm the product in any way. We know people do freeze it. Anecdotally, I have a lot of customers, surprisingly, in some of the really hot southern states like Mississippi and Alabama, who tell me they like to freeze the pads. They take it out of their freezer to the bee yard, open it up, put it inside. When the pad sort of thaws out a little bit, it may actually, in fact, slow down the release of the formic acid. And in really higher temperature areas, it may be a benefit. Not something that's on our label or something we advocate, but anecdotally, we got a lot of people in the South who do that and like that. So, but one of the important things we like to tell people is freezing the pad does not extend the shelf life. Some people think, well, if I keep it frozen, I can use it past the expiry date. No, you're still constrained by the expiry date, even if you freeze the pad. Yeah, so we got, like I said, we have the 2 treatment options, 2 strips for 14 days. Option 2, 1 strip for 10 days, followed by a second strip for 10 days. And just a little graphic here to show that we're killing mites below the cap. We are the only product that does that. So let's talk about what you actually need to have a successful treatment and a successful outcome with Formic Pro. There's three key things you want to make sure you have covered. Hive strength. We recommend a minimum of 4 to 5 frames of bees, and we're talking about frames covered in bees. It's not an ideal treatment for nucleus colonies. For those of you who some of you may know this, some of the newer beekeepers may not know this, but the different miticides have different modes of action, different ways they work. Anyone who's using synthetic miticides, products like Apivar, Apistan, Baverol, these synthetic plastic strips, they're what we call contact strips. And the way they work is, the bees walk across them, they touch them, they come into contact with the active ingredient, and then the bees touch each other, they spread it around, and the mites get into contact with the active ingredient. So a product that works that way, the hive strength is not as critical. Our product is a fumigant, it's a vapor, so it's not a contact strip. So when you put the strips in, they vapor off, and it's unpleasant for the bees. They don't like it, and they'll begin to fan, and they'll move the vapors around. And our research over the years tells us that we need a certain amount of bees to do that. And it's about 4 or 5 frames of bees. If you were to put 2 strips into a colony that only had 2 frames of bees in that colony could be overwhelmed, and you could end up with actually a high bee mortality, or even possibly colony mortality. So again, hive strength is critical. You want to have that minimum 4 or 5 frames of bees. Another critical is application temperature. For our Canadian friends, we want to be between 10 and 30 degrees Celsius. Below 10 degrees, it vapors off a little slower, which could affect efficacy. Not a big deal. I mean, it will still work. Below 10 degrees, the product will still work. It may not work as well, but it will work. The critical part becomes at the higher end, at 30 degrees Celsius. Above 30, as the temperature elevates, the formic acid vapors off faster. If you remember, we're trying to get a slow release so that we don't overwhelm the bees with the vapors. So 30 degrees the upper end, or for our American friends, between 50 and 85. We want to be above 50 and below 85. And of course, we're talking about daytime temperatures. If your nighttime temperature happens to fall below 50 Fahrenheit or below 10 degrees, not critical if the daytime temperatures are coming back up above 10 or 50. So ideally, one rule of thumb I like to use is it should be warm enough for the bees to be flying. Here at NOD, we get the same questions every year from the newer beekeepers who are starting their process. Springtime will roll around, come out of the winter. First day the bees are flying, our phone starts to ring off the hook. Hey, my bees are flying today. Can I throw my Formic Pro on? And usually, winter can be quite stressful on the bees. What we like to see is the bees have been sort of regrouped from the stress of overwintering, at least flying consecutively for a week or two. They're bringing in some nectar, or if in your area where you have to feed in the spring, make sure they feed so that the bees are not nutritionally stressed when you do your first spring application. So that's why I always tell people they should be flying regularly for a couple of weeks. Yeah, so that's temperature. The other key is ventilation. Ventilation is important. If you're using standard 10-frame Langstroth equipment, we like to see the bottom entrance fully open. If you have an upper entrance, fine, open is fine. You don't have to close the upper entrance. If you have hives that don't have an upper entrance, that's fine as well. What we're a little concerned, or we want to pay attention to, is too little ventilation. So with fully open entrances on Langstroth equipment, we don't want to have any entrance reducers on, or any mouse guards, or any robin screens on. The other issue is screen bottom boards. Most of our research and studies have been done with solid bottom boards, and so we know ideally that's what you want, is a solid bottom. If you have screen bottom boards and you have the inspection tray, we recommend putting the inspection tray in. It seems a little counterintuitive to some people. Some people think that, well, if I have a screen bottom board, I should leave it open, it'll have more ventilation. But the concern is that the vapors may dump out and drastically reduce the efficacy. I remember our friend Randy Oliver in California. Randy did a trial, a small trial, it's not a large study, where he actually ran some trials leaving the screen bottom board open. And he said product still worked, but it dropped the efficacy a fair bit. If I remember correctly, I think he said around 7%. Now, if your mite load was quite low, that may not be a big deal. But if you have a high mite load, that could be a big deal. So we recommend screen bottom boards, closing them. For our commercial beekeepers who might be palletized, some of the commercial beekeepers who have palletized equipment, where they have permanently reduced entrances built into the pallets, we recommend you have two options. We usually say you can shim the bottom with a half-inch shim underneath. I've never actually really seen anyone do that. Or the other option is to do an offset, which means when you're lifting up the upper box to put your pads on, when you lower the box back down, you can offset it back a half-inch or forward a half-inch, depending on how your pallets are configured. But keep in mind, this is really for large commercial operations, and those guys figure that out quite quick. And we have a lot of I've had people say to me, well, that's a lot of work, then I have to do an offset. But when you think about it, what do you mean it's a lot of work? You're already lifting the box up to put the strips under, so there's no more work. You just set it back a little bit. And that's what most of the commercial guys do who have really small entrances, so you can compensate for that. Yeah, so hive strength, temperature, ventilations are keys to successful treatment. The placement of strips. I personally run single brood boxes. When I come out of the winter, I come out of winter with a single. Here in Southern Ontario, where I live, by the time I put my strips on, our singles, I'm supering anyways. So we recommend putting a super on if you're running singles, because what that does is it gives the bees some room to expand the cluster, move up, and move away from the vapors. I almost never put two strips on just a single brood box without a super. I have done it occasionally, but usually that's when I'm a little bit below the upper temperature limit. And it's honestly the only time I've ever done that is when I've run out of supers. But we recommend putting supers on. I get asked every now and again from brand new beekeepers who are in their first year of beekeeping. I'm in my first year of beekeeping. I don't have any drawn comb, so can I just put an empty box on top? We say even if you have undrawn frames, I would still put the undrawn frames and box on top so the bees have something to cling on to when they move up to expand their cluster. Placement of the strips. When you're doing the two strips, we want them sort of covering the heart of the brood nest. So in the center of the box, one from off to the left side from the outside frame, one from the right side, the outside frame. So the strips are in the center of the brood nest. If you're running double brood boxes, we recommend putting the strips in between the two brood boxes, because keep in mind, think of Formic Pro as a brood treatment. We're trying to kill mites in the brood, under the sealed brood. So the strips really should be between your brood boxes. If you're running queen excluders, you can put the strips, queen excluder on top of the strips. Our little graphs here we do are a few years old. We did these when pretty much everybody was running 10 frame standard deep Langstroth brood boxes. We know there's some changes. If you're running 8 frame equipment, deep boxes, all the same. We're starting to see some people running medium boxes as brood boxes. And quite often with the medium boxes, we'll see people using 3 brood boxes instead of 2. And then we get asked, where do you place the strips? In that case, we would say between the 2 upper boxes. Putting the strips on a medium on the bottom, vapors might be a little too close to the entrance. So yeah, so strips would be between the upper 2 boxes of the medium boxes. Yeah. Okay, so we're covering high strength, temperature, ventilation. Again, can be used with or without a queen excluder, just whatever your management decision is. I run queen excluders for most, probably for about, for most of the time I've been using, by the way, Crick Strips and Formic Pro. I've always put my strips under the queen excluder. That's what we recommend. That's what's in our instructions. I've been getting a little lazy, and I see other people doing it sometimes, putting the strips on top of the queen excluder. I actually don't think it affects the outcome either way. If you have a few colonies, your hobby beekeeper, I would say just put it under the queen excluder. We know that works. I've done it for years. But either way, I think is pretty much acceptable. So some common observations. So we talked about all the nice things about Formic Pro. It kills below the cap. It's not going to affect your wax or your honey. So people use it for the first time. They call us up. Hey, I put my strips on yesterday. I got a bunch of dead bees on my landing board. And usually when people see this for the first time, the comments I get are thousands of dead bees on my landing board. And we'll ask them, send me a couple of photos, right? And they'll send me a photo. And what I'll see is a couple hundred dead bees, usually no more than what you'd see in an alcohol wash. Keep in mind, we're targeting mites under the brood cap. So we are going to kill some of the younger brood. This will happen. The mature brood that's sealed will probably, most likely will not. The young open brood, we're going to see some damage. I myself, it's funny when you use this product year after year, you get used to that and it just becomes normal. Because I know they always had was when I would see actually why those bees? You got a colony, maybe 40, 50, 60,000 bees, and you got a couple hundred dead bees on the landing board. Here's my theory that's not backed by science at all, but this is what I actually believe. Anyone's ever seen photos of bees that have mites feeding on the bees, you'll often see sometimes 1, 2, 3 mites feeding on a bee. Those bees have a lesion. They have an open wound. I actually believe that formic acid finishes them off, and they end up dead on the landing board. Those bees would have been carried off and dropped off, cleaned up. So for me, again, it's a small number of bees I see in my on my landing board when in treatment. Another common observation is bearding. The photos I showed you in my bee yard, I showed you a roof, the Urban Toronto, the University of Toronto rooftop, where I have 15 colonies on that roof. I remember this one so clear last year from last August. I put my treatment on well within the temperature limit. Of those 15 colonies, 2 of them I had excessive bearding. All the bees come outside. They're up and down the front of the hive. a good look at my bees in the yard. The ones where I get the excessive bearding are usually my strongest colonies in the yard. And I think what's going on there is there's so many bees inside that colony. They want to start fanning and moving those vapors around. And sometimes I think there's just too many bees there from the fan, so some of them come out. When that happens, for people see that for the first couple of times, I'll get calls from people saying, how's this product going to work if my bees are all on the outside of the colony? And if you think, again, going back, this is a brood treatment. We're targeting the mites below the cap. And those bees, either that night or next morning, are going to come back inside the hive. And those vapors are vaporing off. They're vaporing off over a 14-day period. So once those bees are back inside the phoretic mites. So again, nothing really to be too concerned about. Another sort of common observation is that it's not unusual for a queen to stop laying for a couple. Vapors come to the hive, unpleasant. Queen stops laying. Could be a couple of days, could be up to a week. Over again. I'll get a call, and it's usually from the inexperienced beekeepers because they're using the product for the first couple of times. They'll call us up and they'll say, you killed all my brood and I've got no queen. You killed my queen. And I'll say, and then they want to rush out and buy a new queen. I'll say, just hold off and, do me a favor. Do nothing for a week. Let me follow up with a phone call, call you. You call me back in a week. Let me know what you see. And quite often I'll get a call back. Oh yeah, I see eggs now. There's eggs here. The queen kicks back in laying. Very normal to see. Every now and again, I get the call. I laugh about this because I'm a little jaded. I get a call from people who say, "You killed my queen. I'm buying a new queen." I try to tell them, "Don't rush out and buy a new queen. My new queen's dead on the landing board." I said, "Yeah, because your other one's still in there. She just stopped laying for a couple of days." So yeah, so really, what we're saying is, let the treatment run its and what you'll normally see is the queen.
Tom, if I can interrupt for just a moment, it sounds like you might be having bandwidth problems. Can you stop the video on your camera? And that'll free up a little bit of bandwidth for you.
Here, let me try.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Just stop. Oh.
What do you mean the video?
Here. Oops. No.
It'll be on the StreamYard window. Sorry. I thought that might help you a bit.
I don't think I can.
Okay, don't mess with it.
Yeah, I stopped.
That will probably work, Heather. We can't see you as well, but that will likely work. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, you can see my hat, I think, in Tom's video.
on with the show. Thanks.
All right, no problem, Brad. When I first started working for Nod, I mentioned earlier that I had been using the MiteAway QuickSet for quite a few years before I came to work here. So I was used to the product, and I had not experienced, any excessive queen loss. Did I lose queens? Every now and again, sometimes, but I mean, you lose queens even when you're not treated. Formic acid is too hard on queens. And it wasn't my experience, using the MiteAway QuickSet. And when I came to work here, we had commercial guys who've been using the product for years who have really used it, knew it well. And I remember, part of my training working here was to go spend beekeepers. And one beekeeper in particular in North Dakota, I asked him about that. What is your experience with queen loss using the MiteAway quick strips? And he said to me, and this is a guy who ran about 3,700 colonies. He said to me, I lose about 10% of my queens in my operation a year. He said, when I use the MiteAway quick strip, he said, that number doesn't change much. It just happens instantly. And he says, what happens? He says, any of my queens that were, either poorly mated or aging out, or they were going to eventually be superseded anyways, it'll push those queens out and trigger supersedure. That's what it does. And so I built it into my management, and I would just requeen, post-treatment. And I hear this particularly from some of the queen breeders in the U.S. because, this whole could formic acid kill queen? People say no. What's really happening is it's triggering supersedure. And I think sometimes people will refer to supersedure as killing queens. In my mind, supersedure is an anyways, but we just tend to see it. So for me, it's never really been an issue. The queen. I mean, we have people doing different treatment options where they're caging queens to cause a brood bag. So when a queen naturally shuts down by herself for a week, I really don't see it as a problem. I know one thing that I see through my own experience and through the experience of the commercial beekeepers I speak with is that even when you see the brood set back, once that queen kicks in post-treatment, we see some beautiful brood patterns. We used to sort of theorize about, does the formic acid actually have some sort of, sort of cleansing effect on the hive? Because I got some nasty colonies with pretty high mite counts where the brood patterns are looking really rough. And then a couple of weeks post Formic Pro, I see beautiful brood patterns. And we've speculated that maybe the formic acid actually has a positive effect on viruses, on viral loads. Because, keep in mind, we're always talking about, killing mites, but really what we're doing is two things. Because the mites are vector for viruses, and we're trying to stop the spread of viruses. Working on is Heather's actually working on a project to maybe to try and confirm does our sort of our observations, are we actually having a positive impact on viral loads? And you want to speak a little bit on that for a second, what you're doing with that project, Heather?
Sure. We're testing a couple different hypotheses, but that is certainly one of them. So what we're essentially doing is tracking the load of viruses in different areas within the colony. And by areas within the colony, I mean different subpopulations within the colony. So what do the virus loads look like in the developing pupa, in the worker pupa versus the drone pupa? And then if the drone or worker pupa is infested with varroa or not. And then how does that relate to what we see in the viral loads in the adults? So is it related to the adult drone viral load? And then on top of all that, so we're tracking those viral levels throughout the season to see how they go up and down. We're also testing to see what happens when we apply Formic Pro. Virus will work directly relating treatment of varroa to the viral loads, despite the fact that we know that they're vectoring viruses.
So that's exciting stuff, and hopefully we're going to know more by the end of the summer.
That's right. We're working on the second year of this project. Hopefully we'll have something fairly conclusive after this year, but I wouldn't mind expanding our research into the future as well. We'll see what we find. Nice.
This is a little photo that I have in my presentation here. I remember talking to Randy Oliver about this photo. Randy was doing some trials with our Mighty White quick strips, and the point he was making with this photo is he shook the frame, and just by chance one of the young guys who was working with him took that photo, and the point he was making was when introducing the formic acid. I see that myself too.
Sorry, Tom. I'll just let you know that about the last 30 seconds of what you said didn't come through. You seem to be experiencing some bandwidth problems. So just roll back to your explanation of when they shook that frame.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Brad. Because I'm not aware of that. So thanks. Yeah. So Randy Oliver, this is Randy's yard in Northern California. For those of you guys who know Randy from Scientific Beekeeping. The point he was trying to make during with this photo was the young guy who was working with him snapped that photo just after Randy shook the frame. And what he was trying to say is that the formic acid had very little impact on the bees collecting nectar. And I see that myself in my own observations with my treatments. For example, when I'm planning a treatment, I'll go to my yard and I see the bees are flying, they're coming, I see pollen. I put in the 2 strips of Formic Pro, that stops. That day, foraging stops. They start fanning, they're moving the vapors around. Following day, if I'm there early in the morning in the yard, I'll see some dead bees and some dead brood on the landing board. By the end of that day, the landing boards are cleaned off. They clean off the dead bees. By the end of the day, I see nectar and pollen coming back in by day 3. So there's actually very little interruption of collecting of nectar. Yeah, so this is really the point he was trying to make with this slide. Again, Randy's observations, post-treatment, really good brood patterns. One of the things I just wanted to back up a little bit and touch on, when we're talking about planning your treatment, the keys to having a successful treatment: high strength, temperature, ventilation. We'll often hear from people, sometimes in in the north here when we have our hot summers, but usually in the south, people will say to me sometimes, in the middle of the summer to plan my Formic Pro treatment. And usually what we tell people is, when you're planning your treatment, you really should be looking for a 3-day window, because most of the vaporing off is going to happen in that first days. So planning a treatment, first 3 days, they're your critical days. If the temperatures shoot up after day 3, above 30 Celsius or above 85, not critical, not a problem at all. Think of the first 3 days, critical. I've had situations where, day 1, I'm well below 85 or well below 30, and day 2, it shoots up to, 90 or 35, and I'm fine. Ideally you want to get that 3-day window, but first day is critical. 3, after day 4, the majority of that first blast of vapors is out, and it'll be vaporing off slowly for the remainder of the treatment. So again, don't get hung up on looking for 14 days below 85 or below 30. We're looking for a 3-day window. So I think we covered a lot of bases here. Probably a good point to take some questions, have some discussion. One of the things that I like to throw this slide in for new beekeepers. I'm a really big. What we have on there is just some really great videos for people how to do proper monitoring, sugar shake, alcohol wash, sticky board, and a good overview of all good objective pros and cons of all the treatments. Of course, I'm biased. I think there's only one treatment that should be very good Varroa guide to get basic Varroa education. So yeah. So any questions or comments, or have some chats?
So good, Tom.
That's great. Thanks, Tom.
Okay, right under an hour too. Not too bad.
And Heather, thanks, Heather.
Yeah.
The screen, I can only see Tom most of the time.
Yeah,
so.
I'm trying to make it so that you can see both of us. It's here. Okay.
So why don't I quickly run through some of the questions that I've saved here in the chat.
Yeah,
and Tom, I think maybe if you stop sharing, that might free up some of your resources as well.
Okay.
Because your
how's that?
There we go.
Feed has gotten really choppy.
Is it just the audio? Well, I guess it is the audio that must be choppy. I think it's probably our internet.
Yeah, I think it probably is. Just it's good right now. So let me bring these up. So we have a question: what is the difference in Max and Formic Pro? Which is better? You kind of touched on this, but to go ahead and Oh, there's your audio is gone again, Tom.
Oh, really? Is
Try
it
that
really
again.
bad?
It just comes and goes.
Okay. Well, we'll.
Low, so so if you lose me, we won't be losing too much. Keep in mind, like I said earlier, we had Mighty White quick strips on the market for several years. It was a very good product. It really was. Used within the expiry date, stored properly, it was a very good product. But those two challenges were a challenge for us. The 12-month shelf life when you're a commercial beekeeper or you're a retailer running a business was challenging. The other issue was the storage temperature. We sell a lot of this product in the southern states. And so really, I view Formic Pro, some people don't like this term, but I really view Formic Pro as an improved version of the Mighty White quick strips. But again, but again, the Mighty White quick strips used within the expiry date, stored properly, very good product. Used it for years. I think Formic Pro was just an evolution of making it better.
I'm going to suggest, at the risk of breaking things, Tom, can we end one of your feeds and go with one?
Well, I think we'll end Tom's, and then I'll turn my camera back on. Perfect. Because I have the mic plugged into my computer,
and that'll free you up. And so I'll take Tom right off of the.
Yeah. So if you want to go back to, so if you close this window, I think actually, how do you exit this?
I could leave. Studio.
Yeah, leave studio. There you go.
Yeah, you could just leave.
Right. Now I will start my camera again.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Any better?
Okay.
Well, we'll see, right?
Yeah. Maybe it's just the fact that two of us were using the internet. And
it definitely wouldn't help.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go on to another question here. It's a little bit of a longer one, but some overtime experience here.
So no, Formic Pro has remained the formula. So the question is, in 2019, I used Max and lost a queen. In 2020, I switched to Formic Pro and lost another queen. Since then, I've lost no more queens since Formic.
So your audio is still dropping out, just so you know, but we'll just keep going. We'll muscle through it.
No, it shouldn't be that. Okay, so effectively, no, nothing has changed in our formulation. It's exactly the same as what it was originally registered, which I believe was 2017. Is that the case?
I lose track.
Anyway, yes, we have not changed the formula. What do you see as
a very generic question, but what do you see as the next big threat to honeybees?
Well, I have an answer to that question. Have you guys heard of this hornet called Vespa velutina? So this is the hornet that was recently discovered in Georgia. It was introduced from 2004, I believe, and it spread from France effectively throughout Europe. And it was last year detected, I think, announced by the USDA. Now, I had the opportunity to go and see this hornet in action in Portugal last year. I had guys telling me that had been beekeeping for 40 years that they were going to stop beekeeping. It's so bad. This hornet sits outside of the honeybee colonies, and even though it's a bright, sunny, beautiful day and there's tons of forage, the bees do not leave their colony and they starve to death. It was horrifying to see. So I think that this is probably one of the bigger threats, especially if it manages to establish itself in North America. I think it's going to be a problem. Did you have anything to add, Tom?
Well, I mean, there's always tropalaelaps on the horizon, but I mean, we also see some pretty promising results with formic acid. So I think I'm going to go with Heather, and a little more worried about the Vespa. Yeah.
So Ken says, I've heard that Formic Pro shouldn't be used with nukes because there isn't enough space in the hive. How do you treat your 6-frame nukes, Tom?
My 6-frame nukes. Well, if you noticed in the original photos in my presentation, I
your audio. As soon as you said I, and then we missed what you actually do.
Okay. Yeah, I said so. I do it a little different. So even still breaking up.
Yeah, as soon as you say I, and then it breaks up.
Let's try one thing. Hold on.
Sorry, everybody. We'll be patient. I think they're trying a different mic, perhaps.
Brad, can you hear us now?
Yeah, we've got you now.
Is this better?
I don't know. We'll try it.
Okay,
we'll see.
We'll try.
Okay.
Tom
If not, the next thing maybe we could just try to turn off video again, but
yeah, we can do that.
I'm getting very insecure here, Brad, because it doesn't happen when Heather's speaking.
No, it doesn't. It actually doesn't.
Okay,
so tell us about the 6-framers, Tom.
Yeah, I do it a little differently than some of the guys in Western Canada with the 6s. I run 6/6. So even though it's a 6-frame nuke, I'll have one on top. So really what I have is 12 frames. And I've actually strip quite successfully, like one strip followed by a second strip. And I've actually done it with 2 strips. And because I think it was a little too much brood damage, but with the one strip followed by a second strip 10 days later, it was fine. So that's typically what I do.
And you are dropping out a little, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure, Tom, whether it's a issue of your microphone not picking up your voice. So maybe a little closer to the mic, we can try.
Should I try turning off the camera?
You could try, yeah.
Let's give it a shot.
Any difference, Brad?
I'll let you know. So Brian C, I used Formic Pro last year for the first time and used 2 pads. It worked really well. I did notice screen bottom board and queen excluder had some signs of the acid affecting them.
Yeah, you'll get a little discoloration. I mean, like I said, I've been using it twice a year for more than 10 years. I've the plastic queen excluders, and I got a little discoloration, but nothing that's, I think, pretty normal wear and tear. Nothing I was too concerned about.
Sorry, I'm not very good at keeping up with the questions. I get behind. I'll give you this one.
Would the number of pads change for a single versus a double brood nest? And the answer is no. They use the same number of pads.
Yeah, that's a great question, Stephen. I should have touched on that during the presentation. Again, something that makes our product a little different than the contact strips. Because it's a vapor, whether it's a single brood box or double brood box, never changes. It's always 2 strips, which makes a huge difference for our commercial guys who are running thousands of colonies, because it really drastically reduces the cost of treatment.
Any thoughts on 3 single strips, 10 days for a total of 30 days?
Only mean one strip, 10 days.
Yeah.
manufacturer, I'm supposed to say that would be an off-label use. But as a beekeeper, I've seen some pretty creative and I've also sort of I go with the theory these days. Some people will call me and say, yeah, I use your product, but not as you prescribe. And I go with the, hey, if it's working for you, keep doing what you're doing. I use 2 strips in the spring, and I do a midsummer treatment. Only in the last few years did I start doing oxalic acid follow-up in the fall. One of my colleagues here at Nod, one of our previous employees, she used to do the same as me, 2 strips spring, 2 strips midsummer. But instead of oxalic acid in the fall, she would actually put in 1 strip in the fall as her sort of fall cleanup. Again, not as per label, because she wouldn't follow up with a second, but worked well for her.
I would say to the 3 strips in a row, that's a fairly long time to have a stressor in the hive.
Yeah.
So 20 days is one thing, but an extra 10 days on top of that, I wouldn't personally want to do that.
Yeah.
So have you heard anything about the USDA changing the rules for mite products? So yes. Sure. So the last that I heard, and I think that EPA will no longer be overseeing the registration of mite products, and that's going to be migrating to the FDA. And the FDA has a different set of criteria. And because they're more used to dealing with medications for humans and food for humans, they probably will have a stricter set of criteria, and most likely will be more in line with what's already the case in the European Union. So we already meet the requirements for registration as a veterinary medicine in the EU. For us, it probably won't change much, but for manufacturers that are producing products that are only sold in North America, they may see some challenges. Do you use 2 treatments a year, spring and fall, and no other treatment? Is this a successful treatment protocol?
I would spring. I have 3 goals when I treat. I want to start the year off with as low mite count as possible. So for me, a spring treatment is not optional. I treat, always treating the spring. I used to call it my late summer fall treatment. I've been doing it a little earlier. I don't know if it's the seasons getting longer, but I'm actually doing more what I call a midsummer treatment. Some people, and then I do my follow-up treatment in the fall. That works for me. We have other people in here in the company who actually do spring and more of a fall treatment. Yeah. And I think either will work. I think the goal really, and one of the messages, as educators, we try to drive home is the goal is to never let your mite levels really spike to the point where you're doing damage control, trying to knock down. If you can keep your mite levels, low enough that difference between midsummer and fall won't make a big difference. But, where we run into the problem is the, not treating. All of a sudden, late summer, early fall, your numbers are out of control. And now you're, going back to what we talked about earlier, the goal, we're not just killing mites, we're trying to reduce viral loads. So for me, I want to knock my levels down before the queen starts laying what will be my winter bees. And I want to go into winter with as low a count as possible. Way of getting there.
Yeah, and actually just to go back to the work that we're doing with the viruses too, that's one of the things that we're actually looking at specifically is the timing of treatments and how that impacts viral loads. So like if you get a super early spring treatment in, is that better than waiting until, say, the economic threshold or whatever is being advocated by the local beekeeping community? Is it actually just a better idea to curtail it right at the very beginning of the season?
I want to see our friend Ian is in the house.
Yeah.
Ian's asking me the tough questions here. So explain the expiry date of the product. What's expiring? Formic acid's a very stable compound. You know, one of the challenges is our polysaccharide gel pad. That is really what's expiring. That begins to break down. And remember, going back to talked about earlier, is that what we're trying to do is we're trying to get a slow release product. So the formic acid is not vaporing off so fast, so high that not only are we killing mites, we're killing bees. That's a bit of a difference between the Mite Away Quick Strips and the Formic Pro. The Mite Away Quick Strips, when you got to the expiry date, broke down much faster than the Formic. You know, if I have a February 24 date, will it still work for a June treatment? Again, as manufacturers, we're bound by law. You shouldn't use expired product.
I will say that another aspect of the product that can be expiring is the packaging. So if you're past the expiry date, it's possible that the packaging has broken down slightly. And if that's the case, your product might have been gassing off before you get to put it on your hives. And in that case, it's not going to.
Yeah, so it could be either. Yeah.
We just got a couple more questions, and then I'm going to bring some more guests on the screen to flesh out some more conversation on this, if you don't mind.
Sure. It's possible that we might in the future consider changing the label. It's not in the pipeline currently.
Yeah. But we were having this discussion today at the office. Yeah, I know a couple of beekeepers down in Mississippi, Louisiana, who swear by freezing the pads. They like the way it works down there. I don't doubt it, but again, it's not something we have the data on.
Okay, we'll deal with this last one, and then we'll bring our panel on.
We don't have any specific plans for a treatment for small hive beetle. I'm mostly involved with the research and development. I'm always thinking about different treatments for different pests that are up and coming. That is certainly one that I have on my radar. We don't have anything specific that we're working on.
There was someone in the chat, and it's anecdotal, of course, but said that if he has a hive beetle problem, he'll use some Formic Pro and bring that problem right down. So perhaps there is a connection there that can be worked on.
No, we get that one a lot, Brad. I've had someone call me and tell me they read a paper that said, you know, Formic Pro, Formic will knock down small hive beetle. I don't think that paper exists because we've never seen it. We'd be all over that if we thought that was the case.
I know people actually have screened a number of compounds for their efficacy against small hive beetle, and formic acid was not among the successful candidates.
So I'll bring some panelists on here now. If I can have the panelists each activate your cameras, and I'll introduce you one at a time as I bring you on. Corey, I'm going to bring you on first just to give you that warning.
Lucky
so here
me.
We have Corey from just north of Cornwall, I believe you are, Corey, right?
Yes.
And just as a reference size of your operation right now, how many colonies are you operating?
I'm just north of Cornwall, Brad, which is not too far from the Frankfurt area where Tom and Heather are. We're about 2.5 hours east of them. I have a sideline. I consider this as my semi-retirement. I keep promising the wife that I will stop at 300 colonies. I currently have 160 from because of my winter losses. I never dare say I got more than 300 at this time, you know. But I have used Formic Pro in the past.
We'll bring each person on the live, Corey, and then we'll just do a round table as we go. And I'm going to bring Matthew on next. And so here we have Matthew Polinsky. Matthew is our esteemed KRTP. That's our knowledge transfer program lead. And so Matthew's I'm very happy that Matthew could join us tonight on this. And I'll bring Mike Gordon on next. And so Mike Gordon is our man from Dancing Bee, Manitoba, and he has a lot of interest and a lot of knowledge in Formic Pro and formic acid. I'll bring back Bob Walker onto the screen. Sorry, Bob, I didn't warn you I was going to do that, but here you are. And Bob Walker is in South Carolina and operates I would say it's a medium to larger hobby operation. I don't know if that's, the way Bob would characterize it, but
it's a not-for-profit.
It's a non-profit. It's like my business. It's a non-profit. So I would bring Charlie on next. So just to warn you. And so Charlie is Sawmill Charlie, otherwise known as Popcorn Charlie, is out in Eastern Maryland. And Charlie runs probably similar size operation to what we just described for Bob. And I don't know if I don't have a camera for John Russell yet, but sometimes he's too shy to turn his camera on. John Russell is a beekeeper and businessman in the honey business here in Winnipeg. So he's one of the VPs actually of the Red River Apiarists Association. So I work pretty closely with John. Welcome, John. So welcome everybody.
Hey. Good to see you, Brad.
And so, yeah, let's just open it up and let's start throwing some questions around, and I'll just let you break in, jump in, and
I have a question for Corey.
Yeah,
Corey, did we meet at North American Honeybee Expo?
We sure did. We were walking down into the entrance one time there, Tom.
I thought so.
Yeah,
So.
That is a question I actually have for you. I don't know if you've had any more information since the last time we talked, other than this exciting information about how the Formic Pro might kill viruses. I'm really anxious to hear your research on that, Heather, as it comes out. That could be a real game changer as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I will keep us all informed as it comes out. The first year looked promising, but it's still pretty preliminary. We did see reductions. They weren't statistically significant, but reductions in viral loads.
Well, at the time I tried it, because it's just an observation that only dawned on me just now, and I used the 2-pad treatment already a couple of years ago. Although it didn't really kill the mites for me under the cappings like it should have, I do remember the queens going really crazy, and I had a very good winter nest those years going into winter. Those queens, they really did turn on the jets after the treatment. Tom, have you ever had any more kind of information why this specific treatment for me may not have killed the mites under the cappings since we talked last?
I don't know, Corey, we get these questions, do we have all the answers? No. I think one of the challenges with all the organic acids and the organic treatments is there's a lot of variables, hive strength, temperature, humidity. Yeah, I wish I had a good answer on that one.
Yeah. In fairness, I should have gave you, I guess, a little bit of a background on whenever I used it. It was for the fall treatment. I just pulled my honey supers off Labor Day weekend, so the temperature range was probably in the 20 to 27 range. Like, we're just in Eastern Ontario, so it's not much different from where you are at your home yard. But yeah, like whenever I did my washes, those numbers weren't what I was expecting. Let's put it that way. And I just kind of chalked it up. Maybe I get a bad batch. You know, like, I do hear lots of stories of lots of successes. So I'm not by any means knocking the product. And if it proves to kill viruses, well, I'd be willing to try it again.
Yeah. I guess. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tom.
No, you go ahead, Matthew.
Oh, I was just gonna say, if I could kind of start off with a general question, I suppose, and it might be prairie specific, but it's also good to see Mike Gordon here with Dancing Bee, because I know that people who sell the product also they talk to beekeepers a lot. They hear what beekeepers are thinking, their experiences with products. And stuff like that. So this is probably a question for both Heather, Tom, and maybe Mike. So in terms of maybe a prairie-specific question for Manitoba, which would also be applicable to, you know, North Dakota, Wisconsin, etc. What do you hear the most frequently back from beekeepers? You mentioned a number of different things that you need to adjust or manage when you're applying the treatment: ventilation, hive strength, temperature, the placement of the pads. So is there something that you hear back from people in kind of the prairie climate where they maybe just needed to get it just right, or they needed to adjust things a little bit in order to get maximum efficacy?
I hear people that talk about putting on a single strip and then waiting 3 days and putting on another strip. I've mentioned that to Tom before, and Tom goes back to the, you know, it's far more effective for under the cappings if you do the 2 strips simultaneously. The people that have told me the 3-day wait and adding the second there, they traditionally don't have mite issues. They're good beekeepers, but I do know that it's off label, so I tend to not recommend that to my customers. I try to stick to the label as much as possible. But when somebody asks me for, you know, I saw hundreds of bees that next day on my landing board, you know, then I say, well, here's one possible alternative, but I have to refer back to, like, the label. This is where you start, and this is where you should be following it. But I have heard of people with, you know, limited success without having a huge bee drop the following day after your first application, if that helps.
Yeah, you know, because, for example, I think, like, you know, I have treated above 30. You know, I've had, you know, situation where I'm going to be gone for 3 weeks. I'm really concerned about my mite levels, and I'm looking at temperatures in Toronto that are 30, 34 degrees on that rooftop, and I've still treated and came out fine, you know. But I think it's, you know, I'm not compounding the stressors. I got really good ventilation. The hives are not nutritionally stressed. I find where we sometimes run into the problems when you start what I call compounding or stacking the stressors. You know, you're pushing the temperature limit, coming out of a dearth. The colonies are, you know, nutritionally stressed, or, you know, some of the pollinators where they're trying to be efficient, where, you know, you're unloading in a holding yard before the bees are all back to their individual yards. Well, let's throw the treatments on now. You know, they're nutritionally stressed, and you so I call it compounding stressors, you know, because one of those things alone, you can, you know, a YouTuber down in the States who we all, you know, many of us follow, who's a small scale but a good beekeeper, Bruce. I think you follow Bruce, Brad, Bruce's Bees. You know, Bruce made the mistake one time down paper off the strips. But, you know, he had all the other bees were ticked. He was well below the upper temperature limit. He had good ventilation, good sized colonies. The colonies were well fed. You know, he still had a good treatment and didn't do any damage. So I think it's, you know, I call it the thinking man's treatment. You got to sort of, you know, tick all those other boxes.
I'll ask a question. I'm down here in South Carolina. I have not used Formic Pro specifically because of the temperatures down here. I mean, we're getting days 85 plus right now. And, you know, our flow is going right now. So once our honey flow stops and we go to start treating, well, then 90, 100, 110 pretty consistently. So I've always, like I said, it's 80 degrees. Well, unless I'm putting them on in November, and sometimes November is still questionable if it's going to break that threshold. Are there specific times that it would work better? I mean, that's when our mites are going to be the highest in the fall. Our temperatures don't typically fall in that range consistently.
That's your, you know, that's where it comes really regional and geographic specific, right? You know, I agree with what you're saying. You have a challenge in the southern states with the upper temperature limits. But, you know, I was down in Florida and I heard the talk for the first time. And then I heard it for a second time at the North American Honeybee Expo, where Cameron Jack from the University of Florida, Cameron ran a trial where he was comparing all the registered products through a 12-month period in Florida. And Formic Pro performed extremely well in the spring and their late fall winter. Did not do very well in the middle of the summer. They're you know, in Fahrenheit, they were like up well above 100, 110 degrees there. He said, we did some damage to some colonies, right? And he's in the room. And I said, Karen, no, our label will tell you that. That's not a surprise. I'm really excited by what you're showing there in the spring and the fall. You know, the guys in southern Georgia, like even take Georgia, for example. Southern Georgia has a very different climate than the guys in North Georgia, but they still have a window. So you might be right, Bob. It may not be a midsummer treatment for you, but you know, but you probably do have a window.
I just need to find when that is.
Yeah.
Keep in mind too that you are allowed to use it during the flow.
Okay. That might be an option then.
Yeah, it's one of the only registered treatments that you can use during flow in North America.
It just feels like you get to the point to where are you doing more damage with the treatment, or are the mites doing more damage to the colony than the treatment? So it's the lesser of two evils, right? Yes, I know there's going to be damage to the colony, but is that less than the damage that the mites are inflicting on the colony?
Yeah, I've had this conversation with commercial beekeepers in the U.S. where particularly the guys who are inclined not. I've talked to guys who don't want to treat in the spring because they're afraid if it sets back their brood, it may actually impact their honey. If you have an extremely high mite count, that's going to have a negative impact. You know, you bounce back from the treatment. You don't bounce back from a really high mite load during the nectar flow.
So I have a question here in the chat. How many milliliters of formic acid are in the Formic Pro pad? Is that proprietary?
No, it's on. I mean, I don't know the exact milliliters, but the percentage is 46%.
Yeah, because we do it weight by
volume.
It's
46% by weight.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. So here's something I hear a lot. I think he means humidity. I hate to change someone's words, but I think humidity is often a concern. So if you could speak to that.
Yeah, we actually have done a number of trials under a number of different climatic conditions, including Hawaii and Florida, places where the humidity is pretty high. documented evidence that the humidity is actually changing the efficacy of the treatment.
Here in Eastern Ontario, you know, the humidity can get up pretty high as well, especially during the honey flow. Now, with the humidity or the humidex being high, is it the efficacy being changed for the worse or for the better? Because it's at a point.
Right. We don't. Our data doesn't show that there is any difference in efficacy in the dry or the wet conditions. I mean, people like Randy are running it in Northern California where the humidity is quite low. And then again, we have these trials in places like Hawaii and Florida where the humidity is quite high, and Ontario, where, to be fair, most of our development happened was in Ontario.
Yeah.
And we don't see any differences in the efficacy. And there really shouldn't be much difference in efficacy because the humidity is controlled tightly by the bees inside the colony.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and going back to Florida, Cameron's trials performed quite well in southern.
My question is, with the humidity, I've always found I've been using your product around September. Temperatures here close to Baltimore, Maryland are less humidity. Usually it's 80 degrees or a little bit less is what I like to run it at. And do you think that the humidity might have an effect where it increases the potency of your product, where it might be detrimental to the queen? I mean, there's always been people say, it might kill your queen or whatever. I've not experienced that. I've always made sure that the humidity was low and the temperature was 80 degrees Fahrenheit or less. And I apply 2 pads at a time and had good results with the product and without any mite or queen damage. Is that anything? Have you ever looked at that part of it? I mean, as far as humidity goes?
No, we just don't see it. We just don't see it.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's, like I say, I've used it in September, usually around, around the 1st or mid-September when it's low humidity and temperature is a little bit lower. And then when I start treating with OA later in the fall through the winter time, and I'll watch mite drops, I find a minimal, very small amount of mite drops where I feel like I've used other products where I've had a lot of mite drops in the winter time, and I'm like, oh, the Formic really does, where you're 80% of your mites are underneath your capping is what most people say. So it does kill, a good portion of the mites. And I found that with the OA through the winter time to kind of mop things up throughout the winter, I had very minimal mite drops. So
I have a question, I guess, regarding, high ambient temperatures, 2 inches of insulation on the top. Any comments on that?
No. What do you think, Heather?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't specifically tested it in a number of different hive types in different places and haven't seen a difference.
Yeah, we've got guys who are, find it really interesting. I talk to the guys who manufacture the Apiary hives. In my mind, I think of the Apiary hive as, all that insulation, actually a good hive for winter, and yet they tell me the state that they sell. And we have guys using them in the Apiary hives as long as they take off that built-in entrance reducer, works fine. And those are really heavily insulated hives.
And actually, we have tested this. I was thinking about this. We've run trials in polystyrene hives, which are quite insulated, and didn't see any difference there.
I think that, you mentioned this before too, and I just want to touch on it. I don't think any kind of modification like that or any other really should give a person confidence or permission to go off label. I mean, the label's the label, right? It's talking about ambient temperatures, not if you want to insulate your hive, then use it at way higher temperatures than that. That's not what the label says, and so I think that just kind of sums that up. If you know if you get my meaning.
By our data, and we have done lots and lots of testing to try to figure out the best way to use our product, and that's in everyone's best interest. So we're
right.
That,
Yeah.
that doesn't work optimally. Yeah.
Welcome to Ian Stepler. I was introducing people, so Ian Stepler is down in the corner there. Canadian Beekeepers blog. He runs a little hobby operation over near Miami, Manitoba. So I've been mentoring him along. He's doing pretty good. He seems to be catching on to what he's doing, and I've taught him everything I know, and it took about a half an hour.
I think he copied your winter shed, Brad.
I have to, if you don't mind if I ask a question, I have to get back out to the field, but I wanted to, if you wouldn't mind, Tom or Heather, elaborate on expiry date and how you determine the expiry date. Do you have a range, like when you're selling a product, you develop this product and you send it through the regulatory system, you have to determine that expiry date. Does that mean that at that day, that product will become useless? Or is there like a range, like let's say a year after that, it's probably still good, but you still need to use that expiry date? But are you able to talk on that?
Sure. I'll tell you exactly how the expiry date got determined for our product and similar products. It's what we call a shelf life stability study. So we basically put this product into storage for for an extended period of time. And I think in our case, we put it into storage for 3 years. And we essentially, every 3 months or so, we would take the product out and do a bunch of tests on it to see if it still meets all the requirements for the product. And effectively, we submit all that data to the regulatory bodies, and they tell us, like, based on this is what the expiry date is going to be. So in our case, the expiry date is largely determined by the stability of the packaging. And to take that a little bit further, regulatory bodies deal in like year time increments. So it's either 2 years or it's 3 years, but you can't have 2.5 years. If that makes sense.
And our data may tell us differently.
So in all actuality, it's actually likely somewhere under 3 years.
We used to call it the sell by date, not the eat by date on the grocery store shelf.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would certainly say that if it's 1 day past the expiry date, like, it's probably still fine. But like, is that true a month after the expiry date? I can't say. So.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Okay. And also I want to just poke your brain about the 2-pad treatment and the 1 after 1 treatment. So the 2 pads for 14 days, that gets under the cappings. The 1 after 1 doesn't get under the cappings, but it's over 20 days. So you should be getting all those mites anyways, right?
Well, I mean, consider how long a normal phoretic treatment is. It's 42 days. It's like 3 brood cycles, right? So 20 days wouldn't
You should still have, I guess, 24 days on the drones to bring those mites out up in front. So at the end of one of the pad treatments, is the efficacy of the kill that much less than the beginning? Is all the kill happening in the first 3 days or the first little
The
bit of time
majority
period?
of the phoretic kill is happening early on, yes.
Yeah, within the
Yeah.
first 3 days, 5 days maybe. Okay.
Now, I wouldn't say that the 1+1 isn't getting under the cap. It's just doing so to a lesser extent.
And the reason why you advise a 1 after 1 is for what reason?
Well, as your next round of brood is merging, right?
But instead of the 2 pad treatment on the 14 days, there's that treatment you can put on the 2 pads, or you can do the 1 after 1. Why do you have the 1 after 1 option?
Well, I mean, okay, clearly I'm a little biased, Ian, because I like the 2 strips. Like when I'm going through my, because I get asked that question a lot, like, why even bother having the 1+1, right?
Yeah.
If I'm above threshold and I got a high mite count and I got a lot of cap brood, it's getting 2 strips. But springtime, man, I'm at threshold. I don't have a ton of cap brood and splits. You know, I'll do the 1+1. I'm going through my yard. I have this saying I say to myself, if I have like, I come across a colony that really doesn't have 4 or 5 frames of breeze, it's a little bit of weak. Sometimes I say, when in doubt, I leave 1 out. I'll do the 1+1, right? But the other issue too is, like, we have a lot of commercial guys who are using the 1+1 successfully, but they're usually not doing that in isolation. They're doing that as part of an IPM with other products. You know what I mean? So I get a little nervous when people are, you know, they're not treating in the spring, maybe midsummer, the numbers are really getting out of control, and then they think they're going to have a huge knockdown doing the 1+1. I'd definitely be doing 2 strips. So you kind of follow what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I guess the 1+1 then is to make it easier on the hive.
I think that's why most people choose that option.
Okay.
I've seen a bit of a trend with, we have a lot of people who are not used to formic acid. They're a little gun shy. They don't want to put the 2 strips in. And I've seen a trend with some of the commercial beekeepers in the US who will start off using the 1+1 treatment, get used to doing it. And next thing you know, they end up evolving into using the 2 strips. Sometimes it's a process to get them there.
Yeah.
And again, we have other guys who stay with the 1+1. I like the 2 strips. I mean, the beauty of this product is it penetrates the brood cap, and I think it does that best with 2 strips.
Okay, I understand that now. So sorry for dominating the questions here, but I got to run.
They're good questions. They're good questions.
One more question. There are 2 questions. So the excluder, if you have it touching the excluder, does it damage the excluder at all?
Some people say, I've always used metal excluders, never.
We're getting probably half at best of what you're saying, Tom. I'm sorry.
Sorry. I'll try again.
Do the excluder answer again.
I've been doing it 2 pads twice a year, 10 years. I have metal excluders, some discoloration. Yeah. You know, my excluders are discolored, but not to the point where it's problematic for me.
Okay, good. And if I'm treating on a single, I treat with these foam, you know, I call them foamies, just like insulation bubble wrap.
Mm-hmm.
So if I put 2 pads up on top, the bubble wrap and the lid, is that enough airspace around the pad to gas off properly, or is it going to hurt the hive at all? Or what's your advice on that?
Well, I also run singles, right?
Yeah.
But I almost never put 2 strips on a single, because like here in Ontario, when we come out of the winter, we super early, right? So I always put my 2 strips on and add the super.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I think treating with 2 strips on just a single without that second box could be problematic. Maybe not. The foamy may make it more problematic. I don't know, because now your vapors are really being sort of held in there, right? So
Yeah, so
that
you want
one,
more headspace, like you want to put them in almost in between 2 boxes, just to give space for the bees to get away, maybe.
yeah, we like to be able to expand the cluster.
Okay. Okay, very good. I appreciate the answers to the questions. So I got a dash. Thanks,
Get
Brad.
back to work.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Heather. See ya.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Ian.
Take care. Ian's on the night shift.
My G, 9
Forgot
was
to put
setting
it-
up the screen
Oh.
perfectly there, and now it's well, it is what it is.
I made the mistake of putting 2 strips on a single and not adding that second box on top of it. And there was slightly more than a few hundred bees on the landing board that following morning, but I learned quickly that way.
Yeah, I like having I've always done it, but with supers on, right? But it's also kind of the way we beekeep in Southern Ontario. That when you're running singles, typically, so it works well for us here.
He'll be putting his seconds pretty soon, I think, and so I think that would be a perfect time.
Yeah,
use the
I
double
spoke with
pad
Ian on the
treatment.
weekend, and I asked him that question, like, because I said, Ian, you run singles. What's your intention? He said, I'll probably do it with my seconds and between boxes. So
Yeah.
That's what we talked about.
Can I get
We'll
you
go
to
about our
elaborate on that a little bit more about that, Tom? Like if Ian was decide to do that, like, and that's not really much different from us here where we are in Eastern Ontario. If we were to decide to put these Formic Pro pads on, let's say where the temperature range is only from 17 degrees Celsius, where our nights might even be low, still can reach below 10, which is not really recommended to have it on. Would you still take the bottom entrances wide open and do all the same as the recommended label for those colder temperatures?
Yeah, I go with the theory that when I get these calls from people saying too cool in the evening, or I want us to have my entrance reducer on, it's probably too early. I mean, like all products, right? And so yeah, that's why I tell people the bee should be flying for a couple of weeks. It should be consistently above 10 degrees, because that's where our sun, pushing those limits or treating.
I think we lost him.
I think we lost him.
You're dropping out more than you're in now,
No,
Tom.
no.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's our internet connection.
Yeah.
Sorry, Brad.
It's the neighborhood kids playing games on the internet.
I'm blaming it on Canadian Forces Base Trenton down the road.
Yeah.
So we can. We're going to go about 2 hours, so we got just under 10 minutes left if we want to muscle through. If anybody's got any more questions there.
Yeah, like we said earlier, Brad, sometimes people get off the live stream and say, oh, I wish I would ask that question,
Is there a good way to reach Tom and Heather if anybody's got a way?
Do you want me to put your email address, Tom, in the chat?
You can put both our emails in there. Yeah, mine and Heather's.
I think I have.
And mine is just Heather B, and then at nodglobal.com.
Okay, let me type that.
And Mike's pretty knowledgeable about the product too, so place your orders now.
I also heard that, yeah, I also heard that that it's recommended to place the treatment on in the early evening, as opposed to like first thing in the afternoon, due to that, you know, issues with heat.
We actually prefer to put it on in the morning.
Before it starts heating up for the day.
Why is that?
Yeah. Well, if you put it on in the morning, it's sort of heating up during the day, but you get the bees are all at home when you put during the day. So during the period when it's probably gassing off the very most at the very beginning, then maybe not everyone's home there for the bee flight. There's more bee activity. It coincides better with their circadian rhythm too. So the bees are more active.
All right, at the risk of asking a very stupid question, I'll take the burden on me.
Good for you.
So if the bees are very good at keeping the brood nest temperature in, let's say, 90 Fahrenheit, then why does ambient temperature make such a dramatic difference to the product if they control that inner temperature?
They do control the inner brood nest temperature, but they don't control the entire temperature of the entire inside of the colony. So if you have a heat camera and you take a picture of a bee colony, it's not completely heated all the way through, right? The edges of the hive are cooler than the center. The edges of the hive correspond more to ambient on top of the hive largely. Yeah. So the ambient temperature will affect them.
Yeah,
So
I noticed that. I have a little bit of, I don't know if you call it anecdotal observation on that. I did put some temperature sensors in 4 of my colonies for, I don't know, a year or two. And when I first put them in there, I set them on the top bars under the, I can't remember if I was using a foamy at that time, but right on the top bars, and the temperature sensor in the single was pretty much registering ambient temperature.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this was mostly over the winter, but it was into spring and summer as well. So I took that sensor and I tipped it and just put it between the top bars. It really wasn't very far down. Then I started seeing cluster temperatures and whatnot, not just ambient. So that really told me that exactly what you said, Heather, that there's that cluster is what's being regulated, and it's, I've actually heard it described this way, that the outside of that cluster is the insulation. It's not so much the hive. The outside of the cluster is the insulation, and the temperature regulation is really more inside that cluster. And I'm talking more winter, but I think in summer that's pretty much the same thing on a different scale.
So
absolutely. And I've done the similar studies because we were looking at some temperature sensors in the cluster and then outside of the cluster, and there's actually quite a big difference. And that was through the whole season. I had those going. So yeah, it backs up what you're saying as well.
So if the ambient temperature outside, let's say it's 100 degrees Fahrenheit, then the bee's natural fanning to cool the colony down would actually ventilate or the off-gassing faster, probably, right?
Right. So there's actually, it's actually quite complicated because as the temperature goes up, the formic acid vapors off faster, so you risk a flash treatment if your colony is small. If your colony is really big, you actually risk under treating them because then the bees are fanning so much that it's actually dumping all of that vapor
outside. Okay.
Yeah.
Just answered DC's question.
Yeah. So if you're talking about the cluster, like if we know the phoretic lights mites tend to go on to nurse bees and huddle close to the open brood, mostly where that inner cluster, where the mites really are, is more where it's regulated, and that's to be kept around 90 degrees. You still wouldn't see that as a difference as compared to the outside of the of a colony. inside a colony box?
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand that. What's the question?
Well, we know the phoretic mites, they tend to stay on, they go for the nurse bees, and they try to be waiting closer to the open brood to, to jump into the cell to reproduce. Or would you, I guess if the temperature on the inner, were close to the brood, is being regulated at 90 degrees, well, I guess these phoretic mites, would they just be killed before they have a chance to drop in, I guess, if you're doing a treatment, I suppose?
Yeah, but the temperature, so the temperature only matters for where the formic acid is vaporing off from the strips. So once it's vapored off, it gets distributed fairly evenly throughout the colony. And then it doesn't really matter what the temperature is when it gets to the mites. Yeah, certainly once it's a vapor, it's killing off the phoretic mites and under the cap, wherever that is occurring.
Okay.
Okay, we're at 2 hours right on. So last call for one last question or comment. Going once, twice.
Well, thanks, Tom and Heather, for talking with us. I know Brad will tell you that in a minute, but
I was just about to say that.
Yeah, no, I really look forward to the research about these viruses. This is very interesting to me, so I'm really going to be looking forward to upcoming talks, and I hope you guys will come online again sometime.
Thanks, Corey.
Yeah,
Thank you very much for doing this for us. We really, really appreciate it. Thanks to everybody to come on the screen as well, and thanks to everybody who came in the chat. Really good questions, comments, some good conversation there as well. So I super appreciate this, guys. That's great.
Thank you, Brad. We appreciate the opportunity, because for us, we live for these questions, because, and thank you guys for the questions, because there's a lot of people out.
And your audio's gone again.
Yeah.
We need to put closed captioning on.
Type it
Tom,
in the chat, Tom.
we appreciate the questions.
We got that. Thank you. Okay, everybody. Thanks again for spending your evening with us. And we'll wrap this up. And everybody can go and enjoy the rest of their evening.
All right. Good night, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks again.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night, guys.